This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I'm here with Charlotte Horton of Castello di Potentino, Tuscany, Italy. How are you today?
Yep, very well. Enjoying my time in Toronto.
Now, how did an English lit student like yourself, journalist, find yourself in the depths of Tuscany making some incredibly interesting wines?
Well, my grandmother had a house on the coast of Tuscany in the 70s. So I was always having holidays in Italy, and we were living in very rural circumstances. Our neighbours had oxen, these enormous, beautiful white oxen that they used to plough their fields. I loved it. I used to cry every time I went back to London. So when we inherited this house, and my very crazy family decided out of pure folly that we should find a slightly larger property, I went round looking at castles, ruined castles, towers, palaces, everything. Because in those days, usually property was very, very reasonable. The wine boom hadn't happened yet, so there were a lot of these, falling down properties available for not very much money. So we got one of them.
So when it came to the winemaking, were you essentially self-taught?
I was partially self-taught, but I was actually taught by the locals. It was on-the-job training, should we say. I helped them make wine. So we did it with all sorts of interesting machinery. And sometimes the hand-cranked destemmer would not work, and we'd all have to sit down and destem the grapes by hand. Nice. Sometimes something would break down, and we'd be in a wooden vat squashing the grapes with our toes. So this was very important because I actually never studied enology or viticulture, but I did learn it, and I wasn't frightened because there wasn't a disconnect between me and the vineyard and me and the winemaking that sometimes a lot of technical information can create. So my winemaking is very hands-on, based on natural observation, a lot of instinct, but science. I believe in science because I think all science is based on observation. So all viticulture and agriculture is early science, really.
Now, how would you describe the wines you make? You have 3 different varietals, and we tasted across 5 different wines, but there was a very distinctive style, I would say, there, a thread that ran between all 5 of those wines. Would you mind speaking to that, Charlotte?
Well, what I wanted to do, the vineyard's only 10 acres. We have this extraordinary microclimate. We have wonderful mineral-rich volcanic soil. So it's mixed volcanic, a lot of quartz. They're great big chunks of quartz in the vineyard. There's a bit of, a lot of calcium, some bit of clay, bit of schist. But essentially we're under the Amiata mountain, which is an ex-volcano. So we are under the ex-volcano. So we have volcanic soil. We also get wonderful aquifers under the vineyard, so really nice mountain water. And we get very cold nights during the summer because all the air comes off the mountain, and then very warm days because the air is sucked in at one end of the valley. So we get hot sort of sea air from the coast. So all of our wines have wonderful fruit extraction, great minerality and depth, and the cold nights helps with the fruit extraction and a really good concentration of minerals. So our wines are really nice and long in the mouth, very dialectic, very logical. The progression is very clear, and you get this wonderful dry mouth finish with a great deal of salivation, which I like. I like a lot of salivation.
What makes your Sangiovese so special? And also I noticed that not only the Sangiovese, but all of your wines are labelled as IGT, as opposed to using some of the other terms that one could use in labelling the wine. Tell me a little bit about your Sangiovese, what you believe the terroir brings to your Sangiovese, and as a secondary question, why you label all the wines IGT.
Okay, Sangiovese, we are in the motherland of Sangiovese. Sangiovese is a very ancient grape, probably cultivated and developed by the Etruscans. The valley is very interesting because it has this extraordinary microclimate and this very geologically rich soil. It's very bountiful. We have a lot of fruit trees, cherry trees, apples, but also down the valley we have some very old examples of Sangiovese. We have pre-phylloxera vines down the valley, which I have studied. We've taken some cuttings. We have a museum section of the vineyard. Because 150 years ago people didn't buy vines, they grafted. So we've probably got some really interesting examples of some early Sangiovese biotypes. So the Sangiovese, this is really its motherland. We found some Etruscan winemaking stones down the valley, which yet again attest to the archaic history of viticulture in our valley. Sangiovese really expresses itself well in all its subtleties and complexities. It has, this wonderful fruit, it has wonderful minerality. You then go into some of the more aromatic elements of a Sangiovese, and we have some good floral elements. So it has been described as doing all the things that a classic Sangiovese should do, but with a nice elegance and a complexity. Very nice, long in the mouth. Leaves good dryness, and the thing that I think is very, very important is that a wine should be moreish, that you want to taste it again. So your mouth should be prepared for another round of fruit and the whole process again. So it's got to be intriguing and enticing. So I think that we have that type of complexity in the Sangiovese. A lot of Sangioveses are sort of beaten around the head. So you get these very hard tannins that take a long time to soften. For example, we use large oak. We ferment in large oak. I age in large oak for about 2 to 3 years. And the other trick is that we don't really press our grape skins. We don't have a hydraulic press in the cantina. We have a hand press. So it's practically what they call in Italian vino fiore, flower wine, or vin de goût. So it's almost racked wine. This is a technique that I learnt off my contadini teachers, which is that they always used to keep the racked wine, the vino fiori, separate. They would then press the grape skins, and they would keep the torchiato for drinking later on in the year, because it had some of the harsher tannins from the grape skins that needed to soften with time. So this was a way that I adapted some of the things that I learnt off them, was getting some of the more subtle tannins out of the Sangiovese by not overpressing the grape skins. So that's quite a specific example of technique in the winery. The reason why I left the DOC was because our wine is so characteristic of our area. I have 10 acres and I make 5 different types of wine, which are all very different. They have a stylistic similarity and continuity, but they all display their variety or their typology very clearly. So that is winemaking. That's what wine is. Wine should, at one row can be very different from another row, and I think winemaking should reflect this. So all the particular qualities that you have in an environment, in a vineyard, should be well expressed. I felt that being a member of the DOC, I have nothing to do with people in the valley next door to me. So there is no real overlaying characteristic unless we are all homogenizing and not making wine. So I actually have seen that there's an enormous and widening rapidly dichotomy in the whole concept of the DOC or the appellation or the appellation regulations. So either we're going to talk about terroir and we're really going to do it, or we're going to talk about the homogenization of characteristics and a big umbrella concept of characteristics. A very famous winemaking area, not too far away from the castle, has recently had what has been slammed in the press as a bad year. Everyone's very happy to be under the big umbrellas when they're selling well and they can charge a lot more for their wines. The minute that their DOC area gets a bad rating, they're all hiding under the excuse of sub-zoning. Mm-hmm. Now, I do believe in sub-zoning because I think it's extremely important, and there's an enormous difference between one estate and another. I really just believe the direction that I personally want to to go in is the direction of real winemaking, which means that I want to explore the extraordinary individuality of the product that comes from my very small vineyard. So that's how I would describe what I'm trying to do. It's very simple, and I try to make wine in the simplest way possible, trying to pursue the expression of that quality as well as I possibly can.
Well, I think you're doing a damn fine job of it, Charlotte. Thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today. We look forward to catching up with you, perhaps at some point in Tuscany. Bye for now.
Bye.